So welcome to this afternoon's webinar, an introduction to French Baroque music. You might have gathered it's a vast topic, and I'd have to say it's probably our most ambitious class yet in terms of the material Lisette's got prepared to cover. And if you're anything like me, there's sometimes a little bit of an element of mystery around French music, and our aim this afternoon is to demystify this amazingly rich period of Baroque music. And what Lisette's going to do is cover roughly 100 years of French music, centred around three pieces in the repertoire. And it's such a vast period, it's necessary to have a little bit of background information about it. So I'm going to hand you over to Lisette, who will give a sort of 15-minute introduction, an overview of the period to put it in its historical and musical context, and then we'll get underway with our very first participant, Anna. But for now, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you, Lisette. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Pleasure, it really is. I mean, this is really special session. It's the last one for the recording flutes of the series. Well, there will be more, but in different formats. And French Baroque is a style that I've been involved with for a long, long time. I was very lucky as a teenager in Lisbon, which is where I'm from. I had a wonderful teacher, recorder teacher, was a French Baroque dancer, and I started playing for her group when I was about 15. And so little did I know at the time all the Rameau and Lully and all of those gorgeous dances I was playing, because I must explain that this is a group of French Baroque dance and music, and I was part of the musicians. And I've never really stopped working with dancers and looking into the repertoire. It's vast. Certainly don't have all the answers, but what I do have is a great love for it, and gives me great pleasure in sharing that with you. Now, today I thought it would be a good starting point to start what we deem French Baroque, although we could start at Louis XIV, Louis XIII perhaps, but we're going to start in the Lullian era, so I'm talking between 1650 and 1750 roughly. I've divided this period in three periods, smaller periods, mainly because the first period concerns Louis XIV, the second period concerns Regency period with the Duke d'Orléans, and the third period would be Louis XV, when he came into power, when he came of age. During that time, as you can imagine, the amount of change socially, economically, politically that happened, not only in France, but all over Europe, was immense. So the thing with French Baroque, and I know this very much as a student, is that I thought it was a lot, apart from, the lovely dances I'd played, that it was a lot instrumentally to do with Hotteterre, all these low pieces, and little did I know that wonderful and sometimes wacky world that it concerned. And so, what is French Baroque? Is it all about inégal, overdotting, flatman, dance steps, opera? Is it about exuberance? It's about all of those things. But what I'd like to do today is to kind of give you a flavour about what it involves, what it has in it. French Baroque as a musical style is a language unto itself, and we cannot begin to really understand how to interpret and process without learning its grammar. Its grammar, it's made out of social history, musical history, instrumental development, both musically and with instruments, its players, their instruments, and what was around to influence what you see and hear. So I find it really important to give you an overarching introduction to what it is, a very interesting 100 years or so of history. The point of this really is to try and understand and better interpret this gorgeous repertoire, and how to clarify and demystify what for many can be a slightly nebulous European style. Now, when we talk about Lully, when we talk about Louis XIV, I mean, some of you may know that Lully was a Florentine. In fact, Lully le Florentin, who became one of the most important and most influential musicians in the court of Louis XIV. Now, there was music very much was centered at Versailles. It was a really beautiful cultural center. It's really important to understand that France was one of the very few unified countries in the whole of Europe. And that music and the art were absolutely crucial as a political stance. So that France very much sold its own style that was supposed to set itself apart from others, quite on purpose. And it was a marvelous marketing, if I'm allowed to say, to call it a marketing technique, really, because it was really absorbed by other countries. If you think of Holland, if you think of the court at Dresden, if you think of people like Charles II, who were really brought up in France and brought with him all this taste for fashion. Charles II's wife was Portuguese, Catherine of Braganza, and that's my claim to fame. I am in no way connected to Catherine of Braganza, but from her, for instance, fashion style to the French style that was at court, there was a big difference. There was a very rich scene of music at Versailles. This is also where the idea of the modern day orchestra comes from, and this is Lully that really brings together all the elements that were between the 24 violons de roi, of the instruments of the Grand Écurie, which is the royal stables. You've got the sort of woodwind instruments and the percussion. You have the strings and all of that put together that eventually becomes what we know as sort of the beginnings of modern day orchestra. And I must tell you that at points Lullian orchestra went as far as 100 musicians. Can you imagine the amazing sound that that must have had? So it was really important that all the etiquette, the dance, and the musical style that became French was a really strong political message. Now, there's lots and lots that happen within the opera house Lully took over, as some of you may know. There was a fair amount of home-making music, but things were very much centred in Versailles for a long time, until the end, after Lully's death of foot gangrene, and some of you may know that he had quite an untimely death. In those days, you didn't have conductors, you had batteur, des mesures, and their job was really to keep the tempo, keep the speed with a stick, and he got injured, ended up dying from it. There was just wonderful development, orchestrally and musically, wonderful operas that I urge everyone to go and watch, really. As far as instrumental music during this time, the first piece published for the flute was in 1702 and by Michel Labarre, and up until then there is really, that I am aware, no music published for solo woodwind or solo flute, and certainly not recorder. And the reason this starts happening, because it starts bringing us into the second period, which is the Regency period. As Louis the 14th health declined, he became less interested in music and art. He became more pious and more removed from the artistical scene. This then gives way of an artistic scene that moves towards Paris. There's more Paris-centered, where the bourgeoisie really ascends through money into almost center stage when it comes to music making. The Duke d'Orléans was a known art and music lover. He had harpsichord, viol, and flute lessons. salon music became very fashionable. He studied composition with Charpentier and viol with Forqueray, and I believe Hotteterre taught him the flute. In his own palace, he had instrument makers working, and there was a myriad of wonderful musical life. So there's a huge boom in homemaking music, which is where our instrumental music and solo flute and recorder music, more flute than recorder, really comes into being. There's a huge thirst at this point for homemaking music. And so there was also a huge rise in patronage from the bourgeoisie, who was trying to buy their place into the high society, French high society, and money spoke. It really did. There's a wonderful study made by Hannibal. And if you're interested in patronage and the history of patronage, I cannot recommend this book enough. It's a study that, for the period that we are concerned with today, covers about 3,000 private homes. 3,000, which is huge. There was such a thirst and boom in instrument making and compositions that had a ready and thirsty audience. Yes, Tati.
Sorry, I have to say, I mean, that's the wonderful thing as a string player I find about French music. If you want to find a piece for an unusual combination of instruments, you're going to find it in French repertoire. It was just so rich and varied, wasn't it?
Yes,
and this
very
is
much so.
Domestic market that we're talking about. Unusual combinations, you know, hurdy-gurdy and violin or all sorts of things. Really,
and
really
Musette.
wonderful.
And Musette, you've got all these wonderful bucolic concert champêtre. You've got, oh my goodness, there was a lot of things. I mean, another thing I must say is that there was always the sort of shadow of Italian music, and that was always there. And in fact, if you think that Lully was Italian, that Charpentier had studied in Italy, that even Rameau went to Italy for a few months with his violin, and it's really, really interesting. Now, Paris had a rich tradition of private and homemaking music. And for example, as far back as 1650s, there are accounts of musicians such as Chambonnière with his group Assemblée des Honestes Curieux, Assembly of the Honest and Curious. They were professional musicians with a king's stamp that made music, I think, every fortnight or so. Giving weekly concerts with royal patronage or every 2 weeks. This tradition carried on and in fact kept a lot of musicians and instrument makers in business. Opera music had been really important in dance. The king danced himself. And Lully was king of the opera house. And I have to say that I do actually have, in this home library here, actually an account of every single opera and how many times it was done and by whom and who are the singers and dancers for the whole period that we're talking about. So I know this is true, that Lully was played his operas well into the 1760s. So you can see the longevity. And that's really, really important to understand that within the sort of royal institution, and the royal institution, there's always a rub between the old and the new. You had Lullists versus Ramistes, which is the era of Rameau and just more forward thinking. He really was very instrumental in changing the face of the orchestra and music in France. So there's a lot going on, and I'm going to try and be as succinct as I can, which is quite tricky. Now, Quant, yes, Tati.
Also, I was going to say, if you don't worry, I've got all the resources listed. Lisette's carefully prepared, so I can put anything up in the chat if you need links to names or guides. Don't worry if we're going over it too quickly, and of course you can always watch it again later. So yeah. Sorry, back to you, Lisette, but don't panic. There's a lot of information.
There's a lot going. In fact, I wrote about 18 pages, which was just a bit excessive, but you know, there's so much, and this was only the tip of the iceberg.
Yes. How do you condense an entire subject into 2 hours and hear the music?
You really can't, because then you have to go into so much detail, and we don't have the time, nor is this the place, but just to give you a flavour of what's going on. You've got definitely Italian influences coming in through things like the Concert Spirituel, which was the first sort of public concert organisation that was actually founded, Anna Grayson, by Danican Philidor. Okay, now the first permanent concert organisation to give a series of subscription concerts on a commercial basis were the Concert Spirituel, founded in 1725 by Danican Philidor. The Philidor family were extremely important in Parisian life. The first concert was on the 18th of March 1725 in the Salle Suisse of the Tuileries Palace. It included music by de Lalande and Corelli's Christmas Concerto. How about that? I think that's really interesting, and it's really telling a story, because for some of you would be aware of the fight between the Italian and the French, and things like you know, l'apothéose de Lully, l'apothéose de Corelli, trying to unify les Gours Unis, all of those, the United Nations, all of those things were ever present, and actually in fact gave way in the 1750s to a very big choral called Querelle des Buffons, and the nation was really divided into two styles. Now it's really interesting that Courante goes in to Paris, and I think about 1723, I can't remember, yes, around there, or that he noticed in the Paris Opera that the flute players weren't too bad, but you know what, they were playing by heart and not really looking at the batteur de mesure, because they kept playing the same old, because the French liked what they liked. They liked the institutions never to change, so that they could hear what they loved, and that's wonderful. So at this point, we're talking in Regency period, all the big innovations are in the domain of the homemaking music, or the salon music, where you have private orchestras, and my goodness, they had all the best players. They really, really did. After this, we've got the third period, Louis XV, 1725 onwards, where things are, you know, carry on being quite institutionalized in the Paris Opera House, but things really are shifting and moving. There's an awful lot of homemaking music, an awful lot of all kinds of things, and lots of instrument making. And in fact, one of the things I thought was really interesting as a student is I really forever thought that French Baroque was just really low music, and that, you know, you play Hotteterre, you play at 392. I didn't even know at that point. But I started really looking into Baroque opera, and I noticed, particularly with the music of Rameau, and those who know me know I'm really a Rameau nut, quite extraordinary the music was, and high jinks and big jumps and leaps, and really individual instruments really making a mark on its own, and that's really quite something. And I realized, first of all, quite how much of the old and new coexisted, sometimes peaceful, sometimes not so peacefully.
I mean, I guess, Lisette, that's purely down to people not always having the money to upgrade their instruments at the same time. You know,
absolutely. It's the same as today.
Expensive business now, it's an expensive business then. So not everyone had the latest bit of kit, I'm guessing.
Absolutely, they didn't. And in fact, I know that within, I mean, the Paris Opera House or the Académie Royale de Musique was not the only theatre. You have the Théâtre Italien, you have the French Comedy Theatre, you have all these other ones doing other types, and lots of them playing Italian music. I mean, there's really Italian influence. And let me just, if I have time, last time we talked about a really important piece of research by Lisete, and I'd like to read you a little bit about the Italian violinization of flute music and how important it was now. And this is a quote from this Bach article I read. but talks about this. So the Italian violin style had its effect on music, on flute music in London, Amsterdam, Paris, and Dresden, and thus the demands performers made on their instruments. Differences in playing technique and style, which may have been very marked in the first decade of the 18th century, began in the following decade to be subject to the common influences of Italy and the violin. The violinization of flute music in Paris was of long duration. Corret's flute tutor, Méthode pour apprendre aisément à jouer la flûte traversière, which is in about 1739-40, contains instructions for transposing as well as tricks for making arpeggiated passages in violin music for the compass of the flute, indicating that both Corelli was still popular and that despite the quantity of flute music printed, it seems to have lagged behind on demand. Now the pitch was mainly low. It remained at about 392. It varied. It really varied, even within Paris. And in 1740, Courante says, I have to translate. I wrote that in French. So, tous les flûtes sont du ton de l'opéra. All the flutes are made at the pitch of the opera house, which is 392. And we know that lasted for a long time. But when you play outside, now with harpsichords and other instruments, we've got corde de change, which is the middle bits of the flutes, because the pitch does change, and that's really, really interesting. Now let's talk. Sorry, Kat. Yes.
I'm just keeping an eye on the time. I have to say, so far, I'm cheering you along because I've never heard such a detailed, potted history of French Baroque delivered in such.
I am trying. There's so much I'm missing out. I am very aware I'm not talking about dance and dance steps and all of these things.
Fantastic. But, you're really.
I'd like to talk a little bit about players and flutes. I find this really, really exciting and interesting because, again, there's big development in that. Okay, so I've already said in 1702 you've got the first book of flute pieces for the solo, specifically for the solo flute. Now there's a little bit of a gear up towards it, and Jane Bowers did a fantastic bit of research. I'm very fortunate to have her PhD thesis from 1971, which I know was revised, and I do have the revision, but she is the one that really goes into it. And I'd like to tell you a little bit. I'll be very, very quickly, so Anna can start playing the beautiful and Danican Philidor that she's playing. That in 1692 we find the first accurate depiction of the earliest kind of one-keyed flute, and it appears on Marin Marais title page for Pièces en trio pour les flûtes, violons and dessus de viol. And so that flutes, I'll just give you a quick, because if you think everything is Hotteterre and perhaps Naust, you're right. There's a lot more, and I've got quite a big list. From the earliest ones that we know: Chevalier, Bresson, Frenchman who moved and worked in England; Hotteterre, huge and important family of musicians; Naust, and then within the Hotteterre family, there Jean IV and Nicolas were best known for instrument making. Ripert, Dumont, Naust, Bizet, Lot, Beaufortin, who's a very important player but lived and worked at court of Dresden, Paul Villard, and Denis Vincent. So that's not just two flutes or just the one. That's an awful lot. And more needs to be done to understand the sound and the Italian influence in 3-part flutes, 4-part flutes, and what that meant for the sound. Players-wise, and this we're going to the records of the French Opera House, you've got Mathieu Lallemand, François Pignon de Descoteaux and his son René Pignon de Descoteaux, Jean Brunet, the Pièche family. It tended all of this to work in families. Pierre-Antoine, Pièce deux, Pierre, Alexandre Pièche, Joseph Pièche, and then Philibert Rebille, Labarre, very important, the Hotteterre family, Philidor family, and Danican, François Danican, Pierre Danican, Blavet, of course, Naudot, the Brown brothers, who were German but settled in Paris and had a good life there, Lucas, Guillemont, Hervard, Télard, Aîné. And as amateur players, you've got the Duc d'Orléans and Monsieur de Fargy, who worked for the Duc d'Orléans. So there's a lot going.
Lisette.
I thought that might be interesting for those who don't really know, because there's an awful lot more than we commonly even learn as young musicians. And that's really...
It's absolutely fascinating. As we were chatting earlier, you know, you were saying you've got to basically hold a mirror up and see what's going on. Everything's going on. And you can't understand this music without knowing about the social history. You were saying to me, you know, it's like trying to learn a language without speaking the grammar. You need to know about the etiquette and the politics. So you've just given a fantastic brief potted history. I mean, I know you could speak for days on this.
Yeah, there's so much I'm missing out, of course. But again, the next thing and the last thing I promised before a lovely Anna plays, it's about really interpreting the score and understanding the musical language itself, where it comes from, and how important vocal music and dance was. And I have included in the resources vocal methods and, you know, all the flute and methods, harpsichord methods for you to really have a look at. And you have to really understand what's happening musically, where the ever-changing fashions were. Opera and dance together are perhaps the single most influential aspects to look at. Before opera, you look at the theatre. The theatre is where all the rhythm of the words comes from, the versification, where all the singers, who by the way were called acteurs, not singers, absolutely, they were all trained in speech delivery, theatrical speech delivery. So to really understand where the rhythm of these wonderful things, and perhaps, and you know, certainly things like the slow movements are really, so all the vocal ornaments, just think of port de voix, for instance, where all of it comes. It's really, really about dance steps, rhythms in the body and words. This is really the foundation and a basis. All of this to tell you, go and listen to theatre, go and listen to 18th century declamation. There's some wonderful people out there doing a fantastic job of it. So the first piece that we're going to listen to is by Danican Philidor. And I'm really, really thrilled that, Anna, you're playing this. Because some of you, yes, Tati.
Sorry, I just want to say I've put the music up. I've put a facsimile up on the chat. I've also got a link to a modern edition, so you can follow the music at the same time.
Fantastic.
And give me a heads up when you're ready, because I'll introduce Anna to everybody.
Brilliant, that's brilliant. So this piece was published in 1712, and it's the only known piece in the whole of the French repertoire to be specific for the recorder. There is no other. It could be perhaps inserted in a group of instruments that could play a piece, but certainly this one, Sonate pour la flûte à bec. Now we must understand, and Danican Philidor was the founder of Le Concert Spirituel, and if you're interested, you do need a lot, for a lot of these resources to be good with French, or at least understanding French. I cannot recommend L'Histoire du Concert Spirituel enough. It's got all the information, all the beginnings, what was happening, really interesting social clues there. It's really, really important piece of music. Now, if we think that, yes, Tati.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think that's even where Handel might make an appearance. If you know me well, you know that make an appearance somewhere. And I have a feeling his music is heard at this point in some of these concerts, but we can substantiate that later.
I have
got a couple of messages coming through. Just check that everyone can see the music, and then I could introduce Anna.
Yes. Brilliant.
Anna, your recorder warm, you're ready to go. Great, fantastic.
Okay, actually, Tati, this is from a Blavet book.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
Here he is, making an appearance in France. Isn't that wonderful? That's really, really beautiful. Now, this piece is a sonata, not suite, huge indication of the mix of the styles. And I'll just be quiet now.
Okay, I'm seeing that people aren't seeing the links to the score. I'll put this up again. But meanwhile, whilst I do that, I'm going to introduce Anna Grayson. It gives me great pleasure for you to be here today. Just a few words about you, if you want to get your recorder warm. So Anna's a 16-year-old, sixth former actually, studying music, hoping to study music at university or conservatoire later on. Currently at the junior department of the Royal Northern College of Music, studying not only recorder but oboe and piano as well. And it's, I think, your first time playing this, not your first time playing the sonata, but this was the first big French repertoire you learned, wasn't it, Anna? So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. And I know you were wanting to play little bits perhaps from several movements to get Lisette's overview on everything. So enjoy. We're very much looking forward to hearing you, and I'll put the music up on the chat again.
Thank you very much. So I think I'll just start from the beginning and then we can always jump on to later movements.
Yeah, absolutely. Just play the first movement to start with and then we'll go from there. Thank you very much, Anna. So beautiful. I mean, I love this piece, and my goodness, I know who your teacher is. Hello, Chris. If you're there, you're very well taught. You're in really, really good hands, and it's such a delight to hear you at 16 already doing things like flatman and doing all these lovely ornaments. So beautifully done. So that is so lovely. Thank you really very much. Now, I think with this piece, I mean, to me, this is vocal. This is a vocal piece. There's no two ways about it. And I think there's all the elements of it there. I have a little theory about these beautiful slow movements and recitatives in French Baroque opera, and also as far back as the air de cour as well. There's an element of that really captures the essence. And the first thing I want you to think about is forget the bar lines. Really forget the bar lines. This music, the harmony is exquisite. I mean, This piece is so beautiful. You know, it really, your lines stand on its own amazingly. You know, it really does make sense. But it's all about the rhythm of the harmony, all the harmonic rhythm. Where does the phrase go? What is the intention of the phrase? What does the ornaments do? Because the ornaments are there to help or to make a point rather than get in the way. And actually, the way you're playing already, wow, at your age is fantastic. It's really, really good. But I wanted to experiment a little bit more with that. I mean, I could go on about Hotteterre ornaments and about all kinds of things. And there's lots and lots of things one can say. I will recommend this book. This is an English translation. You can get this on Peacock Press. And I cannot recommend this enough, by the way. And we can, it's really, really good. And I will tell you why. Although Hotteterre's treatise is very important and very relevant, it's really aimed at the amateur market. You know that Hotteterre's treatise went all around the Europe until quite late. It was really held in very high esteem. It was translated even here in the UK and added to. We find copies of it by much later than its first print, 1707, 1708. Now, Monteclair is in 1739. He was one of the players, a double bass in the opera. He was an opera composer as well. If you like, I don't know how much of this music has been recorded, but Jepse was, I think, one of his last operas, and he's got recorders. He's got recorders in it. I've seen the first edition. I worked on it, and it's really quite extraordinary. What it does give you with this is it goes through all the instruments, including voice, and it lists what the ornaments are called and how to do. This is the single most important source for us as instrumentalists. Anything that involves the voice, and do for the ones that interest in vocal music go as far back in the 1680s with Bassi and his vocal method, because you'll learn all about ornamentation and in that particular style. Anyway, this really echoes all of this beautiful vocal music. And so, for those who don't know, so this is Sonate pour la flûte à bec. I will show what it looks like.
Well, Lisette,
everyone has it.
Music, put the music up for everybody.
Really fantastic. So this is the first, this print is in what we call French violin clef, which is the G clef on the first line. Now for vocal lines, each voice would have its own clef as well. So it becomes really quite something when you're singing, not used to it. But you've got Lentement, and it's in cut. Have I frozen?
I can still see you completely fine.
Oh, yeah, I can as well, actually.
Fantastic. I'm really glad. Okay, so you've got Lentement and a cut common time. And then you start playing on your own. So all the intention, it really is yours. And really what you've got... or even that's all it is. But what it does with it, it's so exquisite and elegant. You've got a coulee, and a shoot, which of course Hotteterre does not mention shoot, but Monteclair does. And what he does with it is really, really interesting. And I always found really tricky to find, I don't know if you find this, Anna, the piece, because the first, now how do you place it in relation to the second? That's always been a thing, hasn't it? What do you do with it? And the thing is, nobody can really tell you this is the definite way. So I think it's really, really interesting. I think you already did such a beautiful thing with it. And with the flatman, how low can you go? How much do you dare in the swell of the note? French Baroque is all about these little gestures within the big the big the bigger gesture, and you've got this series of bars, and to me this is a recit. This is why I was talking about vocal music and versification, all of this. This has, to me, all the hallmarks of it. And the only thing it doesn't have, apparently, to the naked eye, is the French were very good at changing speeds, changing time signatures, which drives people insane because they don't quite know what to do with them. But what they forget is all about the harmony. The harmony really determines where the phrases are, and this is true here. So the first one, and then how do you start? Do you start soft? What is it, introspect? Is it like this? Because you see what happens on the second phrase, Anna. So you've got...
It sort of grows outwards.
Yes.
Yeah, but you don't want it to be too, it's not supposed to, I don't think personally it's supposed to be a big contrast. It just needs to gradually grow.
It does, but it's got yearning, because the interval is bigger. I mean, that's by no means the highest part. The highest part really, I mean, the facsimile, this appears on the third line. This is where it is when you've got the full octave. You start with a... You start with the fourth, the sixth, and eventually you get to the full octave. Do you see what I mean? So there's a narrative all the way through. And I think just be expressive. I mean, the Italians used to say of the French that they are full of perfume and, you know, all of this sort of filigree, but, you know, there's nothing there. It's all smoke and mirrors. Actually, there isn't. It's just really different language. I think is extraordinarily profound, as is Italian music too. And I wonder if we can get sense of line, a narrative through that, because you know the bass line is really supporting it, isn't it? Bum, ba, dee, dum, ba, dee, dum, bum, bum. This is the bass line. Dum, da, da, dum, bum, bum, which is in itself beautiful. Do you know what I mean? But you're really driving it. What is it about? Can we put words to the notes? What would the story be? You don't have to tell me.
It's not sad, but I think it's like I think yearning, maybe words. I can't think of exact words, but yeah.
No, it's all right. You don't need to think of the words if you can feel them. Do you know what I mean? And that's what is so beautiful about you know, playing music and the storytelling and narrative without words, because it's about emotion. You know, and the French were big in this, you know, the passions of the soul and Descartes and all of these things I didn't even begin to mention. And this is important. This is what do you do to your audience? I think you invite them in, don't you? And it's very intimate and special. You know, this is a beautiful story that you tell, but you also tell it your way with your own vocabulary. And that is really, really lovely. So I just... very often I say, and you know, Georgia will know this because, you know, she's been learning with me for a long time. She's been putting up with me for ages. But music is, it's just, I always think that music is already there. The phrase is already there and you're just picking it up. You are making it sound. You are making it audible. But it's surrounding you. It's already, so if you can create that space around you. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then just see what happens between the first and the second one. And this is also, keep your support, because this is not an easy thing to support. So you're doing a fabulous job. I was really impressed. I know Chris is such a good teacher, and I'm just delighted to see such beautiful work being done. It really is joyous. So thank you, Anna. Do you want to start again, Angel? And just start and see, just play a few. Because something shifts in a few bars, and I may stop you, okay, just to let you know, not because you were doing anything wrong, but just to mark a change, okay? So forget the bar lines, just go with how it feels. There we go. Yeah, that's it. Oh, you nearly made me cry. It's so beautiful. Good girl. And you know what I really liked is on the sixth, when you leap towards the F, that you really can do more flattement. Use it for intensity. The more flattement you do, also you've got to be careful with to go into the center of the note without overblowing. Do you see what I mean? So technically you need to keep everything round, don't you? And always keep, I always say, keep your ear glued to your fingers, because in the recorder we've got this wonderful thing where we can really change, you know, with this, because we have nothing. This is what we call a simple system, which I hate that, because there's nothing simple about playing the recorder, perhaps one of the hardest instruments to control, my goodness. But it's have your ear onto your fingers, because you can really, and you know, manipulate, you know, the to do things in such a wonderful way. I think after the shoot, that you have to create that line, you have to keep it going. So that note ends, and careful how it ends. Do you see what I mean? That is the magic. That's what makes us so incredibly special with these gorgeous early instruments.
With the flattement, is there a specific way of doing it? As in, do you get faster or slower, or just
You can do anything. I think flattement is one of these things that you can really use dynamically and expressively. It's there for a reason. Okay. And it's an ornament in itself, of course. So there's many ways you can do it. Some people even like just manipulate it a little bit naughtily. I am yet to find this in instrumental treatises, but actually the French singers did this. They actually, yes, Tati. Oh, your yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Is there a difference between flattement and vibrato then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is, because, well, in woodwind, vibrato is made with the breath. It is a manipulation of, you know, the back of the throat, the glott, and the flattement is with the fingers.
Okay.
But very good question, because the idea is not so dissimilar.
As string players, we make our vibrato with our fingers. So to me, flattement seems closely allied almost to...
It's what we call the French vibrato, but actually it's very old. This is not a new thing. It's certainly not just a French thing, by the way. It's got this wonderful expressive quality, and I think we can really use it, which is fantastic. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 7 to 8 bar, something shifts, because you've got this lament like quality, this storytelling. It's warm, it's like a hug. Somebody's come to console. You know, even if it's your cat that comes in and is just around, you know, something like that. Brilliant. So also it's announce the changes, because this changes so much. Now, how about that note? How about that for blue note? And so on and so forth. So you're very much a singer, you know, in a recit. And the recit is where the narrative of the story is. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So as you develop, because you're already doing such a fantastic job, my goodness, just explore what to do. if you can, I always find, obviously, find yourself a lovely harpsichord player, viola da gamba. Oh, what a combo! It's just divine to play with you, but understand the harmony so you can best work the phrasing with it and what it means. And don't be afraid of experimenting or doing too much. I'd rather you do too much than too little because you're afraid. Because you're only going to learn by making mistakes, by experimenting. You know, people, if you live without taking any chances, you never learn, really. And so this is the same. Get in there. Just really enjoy soul. This is soul music. My God, I'm delighted to hear it. It's just so, so beautiful. So you've got all of this coming on. You've got some exquisite harmonies. And what I would say, it's be really mindful of what is written, where the slurs are, because this is, again, really important to know that, for instance, if we go down, I will put it up. The A here, this is in bass clef in effect. Is articulated. It's not slurred. Okay, and all of this matters. All of this is part of the phrasing. So really carefully look at where the slurs are. Sometimes they get to the end, sometimes they don't, and that's significant. That's very, very significant indeed.
Do they tend to be accurate? Because I mean, I'm so used to looking at Handel printed editions where, quite frankly, whoever's put them together is a bit lazy when it comes to some. Sometimes the slurs aren't that clear, should we say?
And that is very true with some. I mean, again, there's lots I haven't talked about, but there's a school of scribes and schools of the printers that working. There were different types as well. Some composers were more particular than others in checking. So you do get the mistakes going through. But it is a very French thing, these little details, these little nuances, if you want. And it's really important to check, because I would never discard them without seeing what it is like. And I think these ones are good. But it is a really, really interesting question, definitely, because some of them he goes through and some of them it doesn't, but it's really good to check. Now, at the end of this, you've got the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars or 4 bars. You've got a plus lentement, which is just... it's heartbreakingly beautiful, harmonically speaking. Good Lord, this is a gift. And so again, really, really enjoyed. Some people do lots of ornaments and inappropriate things with it, and I'm not sure I would, unless they come from a very good place, and certainly a vocal place. And so I would say to you, lose the bar lines, look into the facsimile. Okay, and really study it, hear the harmony, and start constructing your narrative. You're already doing such beautiful things. Okay, now I think it'll be nice to play perhaps one of, I mean, gosh, there's material here. You've got Lentement égale détaché, which is a thing in itself, is a mystery unto its own, but I quite like to hear a bit of the Courante. And I think that would be really nice to get, because the French word courante and the Italian word corrente mean running or flowing. And the Courante, and I'm choosing this particularly because it was one of the most fashionable dances. This is why I'm asking. The Courante reigned as queen of the ballroom dancers in the 17th century, and it was reputed to be Louis XIV's 14th favorite dance. Yeah, and that's really it. And it's a really, really lovely. It's full of hemiolas, my lord, to put this together. Would you like to play a little bit?
Yes, yeah. I was sort of wondering about inégalité in this movement, like how much or little, and recordings vary a lot.
So oh yes, because everybody has their take, and that's fine. I mean, in general, if you leap, you don't inégale. Do you see what I mean? Inégale, the kind of theory, the bulk of the theory is you play it in notes that in by step, and that's slow enough that you can hear. So you don't tend to do inégale in fast passages because you won't be able to hear it. So some people take it, ta-dum, ta-dum, ba-ba-dee-dee-dee-da. So sometimes it feels nice to do it, but that's not necessarily correct. You know, there's different people say different things, and that's fine. A little bit won't hurt, I don't think. Most importantly, make it dance. I know I said I haven't danced, and I'm not going to, don't worry. Fast beat is an upbeat, never down. Okay? Ta-dum, ti-dee-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-da-dum, ba-da-bee, da-da-da-dee-da-dee-da, dee-da-da-dee-dee-da-da-dee-da-da. Keep it really light, make it dance and flow. This sonata in itself, although it's called sonata, feels like a little mini epic, by the way, to me. It's exquisite. It's like a miniature opera. It's really tricky to fathom, but again, here the trick is going with, there's rhythmical patterns, and there's like, look, with Baroque dance is not something that goes hand in hand with the music in the sense that is a slave to the music, and the music is also not a slave to the dance. Baroque dance or Baroque choreography is counterpoint. It's another layer of counterpoint, although this is absolutely not supposed to be dance. It's in the style of that was dance and known. So it's really interesting that you've got to kind of learn to know where the hemiolas are, not to be afraid of them. You don't need to do them too much, but you need to nod at them within the phrase. If I may play a little bit, see if it helps. And I would keep it light. Do you see what I mean? Now I kind of nodded at some of what the bass line does, because it's got a really cool jazzy bit, and it kind of, on the third line, when you've got the jumps, the bass line goes 1 2 3 1 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 dum bum bum dum dum, and it's got a rhythm of its own, ta ya pa ta, and that is just so lovely. So you need to keep it, and again is the thing where you're free within four walls. I wouldn't do too much inegale on those jumps. To me, they're more Italian. Somehow I hear Corelli, which I think some French people just think I'm completely nuts. But I think there's a little fusion there. It's just gorgeous, but it's the balance is the equilibrium. Anna, okay, we've got about 1 minute. Is there any questions?
I think I just had a question about the next bit. The
Yes.
How detached should it be, and how slow should it be? Really,
Oh, that is the $1 million question. The thing is, there is no correct answer. My teacher, and I've got here my wonderful teacher, one of my wonderful teachers, described it as a two-legged saraband. So some people, because when you look at it on the face of it, what does it look like? Your vot.
Not really sure.
Vot.
Yeah.
Ba, 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 ba. But harmonically, it's so exquisite that it just feels wrong to. So in a way, that two-legged saraband kind of stuck. I have no idea where that comes from. I don't know if it's correct. I haven't really seen anything quite like it. It's unique, isn't it? And this is why you asked what you asked, because nobody quite knows. And I'm afraid I'm not going to give you a definite answer. But I would say, again, if one wants, because the harmony in the bass is, you've got this wonderful chromatic descending line, don't you? With, again, if you're a viol player, you don't know what to do with those slurs and how to articulate it. Tum tum ti dum pa wa ti dum pa wa. So if you do it too fast, you're going to lose the magic, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's
I
what's
just
hard about
listened to a recording by Dorothy Oberlinger where she sort of the first three notes of every bar were sort of where they were the same note, sort of flowed into one another rather than being separated, which
Yeah, I think there is something about experimenting with it. And it's more not how short, but how does it fit within the phrase? What is its purpose? Do you see what I mean? Because perhaps if you speak to her, she'll say, well, I did this because. And that's really, it's a really good question, and I don't have a definite answer. I quite like it slower. I quite like experiment, and I'll just that's another one you can do. There's a few things one can experiment with. But Anna, thank you very much.
thank you.
Who is it playing?
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm sorry it's such a whistle-stop tour, but at least this way we get to hear these three definite periods in this French musical history. So now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to our next player. In fact, we have a duo for you. So Julia and Emily, you might need to unmute yourself. You're on mute at the moment. And could I ask you, that's great, thank you. Would you mind just saying a couple of words introducing? You've dialed in from America. I'm not even sure which part of America you're in. So if you'd just like to just give a couple of lines about yourselves. And I know you're playing, you've got several movements of Hotteterre lined up to perform. I don't know how much we'll get through, whether or not you want an overview or dip in and out. But yes, just say a couple of words so we can say hello to you.
Hi, my name's Julia.
I'm Emily. Hi.
We're dialing in from Virginia in the United States. We're both active duty soldiers and part of the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. And we also play in our historical flute ensemble. And we're happy to be here today.
Oh, yeah. I think that is just about the coolest thing I've ever heard. I think you're two cool girls. This is fantastic.
Amazing that not only you're musicians within the army, but also that they have a historical flute, an interest in playing historical flutes. I mean, as far as I know, in the UK, we don't have a historic performance bit in what we do, you know, musicians in the army here. So, but actually, it's really lovely to see two musicians together in the same space. I can see you're very distant, but you know, for most. I saw you had your masks on earlier and all of that. But you know, it's been really hard to get together physically to make music. So it's lovely to have two of you together in the same space. So welcome. We're delighted you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And this is lovely. I don't know if you want a little bit of information on the music. You'd like to, before now, funnily enough, the first, because you're playing the Allemande, the Musette and the Minuet. They're beautiful pieces. What a good choice, and what a lovely thing to hear two flutes at the same time. Is fabulous. Now, the first one is Allemande, La Maréchale de Villars, and this alludes to Claude Louis Hector de Villars, Marshal de France, Marshal General of France, the highest possible accolade of Louis XIV as an army general. And so he was really, really important. So important, of course. He lived between 1653 and 1734. So important that Hotteterre wrote and dedicated to him. Isn't that lovely? Now, the Allemande, there are three kinds of Allemande that were composed in France. processional dances and concert pieces of the early Baroque, and concert piece of the Grand Siècle, where this really is inserted. Allemande rhythms of the late 16th and 17th century resemble bourrée and gavotte rhythms of the early 17th century, and the concert allemands of the Grand Siècle are elaborate and contrapuntal. Their rhythm are stylized divisions of the early ones. And there's a really good book for anyone who's interested in dance rhythms and all the history behind this fabulous woman, American Betty Bang Mather. Really, this is really so incredibly detailed, and this is where this information is from. She also wrote a really important book that still stands today. This is a bit of a Bible for French Baroque ornaments. Okay, really, really important.
Lisette, I've put the book title up in the chat, the dance rhythms.
Thank you very much.
Great.
I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll start. We hope our sound settings are all right.
Okay. Well, we'll have a go. We'll have a go, and we'll go. We'll see. Wowzers, that was some stunning playing. How fabulous! Vertical is such a treat, but wow, you really can play. That's gorgeous.
Absolutely wonderful. And to hear such close harmonies, wonderful.
Yeah. It makes me a bit emotional. I'm getting emotional these days. It's a pandemic thing, but I just think it's just such a gorgeous thing to hear music live, and I've been so thirsty for it. So thank you. That's fantastic. Now, that was really, really good. I mean, the thing I would say to look at is things like technically, things like flatman, things like leaning into the note. Do you see what I mean? And to make more contrast between the phrases, there are things we can do. But also it's interesting because, you know, on the title, the sort of performance direction says majestueusement et piqué. So actually it tells you how he wants it. Majestically, so proud. Piqué means dotted. We actually get permission to do it. The thing is, then comes how much piqué. So, because this is still, you know, this is still an elegant piece. But of course, I think is majestueusement épiqué because it concerns the Marshal de Villars. So it's about the army general. It's about this sort of really proud, proud character. So you would have that quality. You played it so beautifully musically, you know, and that's really lovely. You did all the right ornaments as well. So thank you. And very nicely as well, all the lovely port de voix, all the lovely double cadence, all of these things were there, which is lovely. The interplay between the two was fantastic, and I think you can definitely do a little bit more. I mean, everything that you've done is correct, basically, and I just wonder if we can go into the phrasing a little bit more, really. Tum, ti di di dum. Because also you're on your own, aren't you?
Yeah.
It starts because all the movements in this suite, by the way, kind of go into each other. Because there's two, I think, movements before this, and it almost goes into each other. So tum, ti di di dum, bum, dee da 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 dee da 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 dee. So that tum is quite gesture. Do you see what I mean? I wouldn't be too shy about it. Because if this is majestueusement and piqué, you do elegant to an absolute T, and I cannot commend you enough.
Thank you.
It's really, really exquisite what you're doing. But I could do with a little bit also consider that you can do degrees of piqué during the piece, depending on the key, depending on the height, depending on where the gesture is and where the story is. So that moments like the do become not just soft but sweet. Okay, and that's really interesting because what he does when he does on the do is that he ornaments, doesn't it? Which is really, really interesting. But I think as a statement, it doesn't have to be in your face, but it can be a little bit more majestuous. Also, it's a nice key. It's a really flute-friendly key. We like it.
Yeah.
And I think you really play beautifully together, which is lovely. There are things with the inégal or the piqué in this case that we can do a few more degrees of with the articulation. And for those who don't know, inégal is a form of French articulation. The French didn't like things to be all the same. Égal. So inégal is when really you have a group of notes that move by step, and what you do, you shift the strong articulation to the weak beat. So people like Hotteterre create a very clear image of this. So in a group of four, you instead of ta-da, ta-da, if we divide into groups of two, you then get ta-ta-da, ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. Or do 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 to do do to do to do to do. So it's not so much doobie doobie, but there are degrees of from ta ta da ta da ti di ta da ta da, which is very just if you listen to it, it's like speech, isn't it? And I bet it's to do with the French language too, with the sound of it, with the articulation. But that then you've got piqué. Tum ti dum ti dum, which is different because it alludes to dotted rhythm more than inégal. And I think the clever thing with this is to know how much to do at what point. Here's a thought. Do you see what I mean? And I think that's really, really lovely. Yes, so start again. And I will stop you. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Well done. That was really lovely. I would consider putting a bit of flatman on the first note
Oh, yeah.
as well. Do it, lean into it. Yeah, so rather than sit on, which you didn't at all, because you're such a lovely player. So from there, it starts coming down, doesn't it?
Mhm.
So it's understanding the phrase, the structure. So I would yearn towards the top a little bit more, because that whole phrase, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, after the fifth bar, that's the lowest point, isn't it?
Mhm.
It goes to there, and then he does, and then he does the same thing, ornamented and do.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I would create a little bit more contrast
Mhm.
between the two.
Would you make the do section less PK? Would it be more?
That's a very good question. Yes, I would work with it. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I would. That's such a good question.
So a little bit more kind of
Gentler.
yeah, yes. And then the previous statement would be a little bit more dotted, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly a really good way of experimenting with it. Do you see what I mean? That's brilliant. So here, it's all, you see, all of this is within the constructs of this elegance. But what we do get, which is fantastic, got clues from him. This is not just, imaginings from the beyond, I always say this is like, messages from the beyond, 300 years old little messages. But he actually writes it. So then what we do, we take it and then we think, oh, how am I going to use that information and things like that. Exactly. That's perfect. I like that. That's it. Good. Okay. Yes, and so keep that sort of lovely elegance, keep the phrase flowing, but there is always space for a little bit of freedom within four walls. Okay, when it comes to phrasing and to taking a bit of time here, giving it a little bit there. Do you see what I mean? So you create this natural ebb and flow. So that the storytelling, so you have spaces to read, spaces to ponder, and spaces to move. Sometimes the music sits, sometimes the music moves. Do you see what I mean? Sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's exuberant and happy. And actually this has kind of all of it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Great. It's really good. Excellent. I love it. Okay, let's go again from the beginning. And this time, let's go to the second half, because I'd love to have a bit of time to do the musette, because it's gorgeous. So do the first half again onto the second time bar.
Yes.
And then carry on. Yeah, yeah. Okay, brilliant. Now, what I want to ask, sorry, that was gorgeous. How soft can you play the do?
Soft.
Softer.
Do you know how soft can you go? Because you go how lovely would that be? Also, it's up to the second part to lead into it. You are so important, I cannot tell you, because you know what? The do starts with you.
Yes. True.
Okay, so you've got the cadence, but the cadence finishes for you, but for you, it keeps going. So I'm saying you and you because I don't know who is with who is who.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, I'm first.
I'm a second.
Yeah, but I don't know, so I'm just going pointing randomly.
We've got Julia on the left, yeah, and Emily on the right. Is that?
Thank you. Perfect.
I think.
Thank you. Julie and Emily. Yay.
There you go.
I'll just point and say you. How terrible. How very un-French of me. I know, perhaps a bit more Portuguese, a bit less French. Okay, so you've got this lovely boisterous line. And the second line, you got do you see what I mean? It's all in there. It's how you go from the first note to the C sharp, because that's the real change. Dee da dee da dee da dum dee da dee. You can change a bit snaky with it, because the other part is doing nothing. No power at that point. Sometimes, not just sometimes, a lot of the time, the inner parts, oh, they have so much power. You change the direction of it there. So perhaps even take a teeny bit of time. The other part will just have to place a note. Tom. It doesn't even matter. Do you know, if you listen to harpsichord music very often, they're not even in time together. There's a whole art of playing two parts that don't match perfectly. And there's a case sometimes. Your second note, second D, is just an octave. It's just the end of something. It's not important. What's important is what comes from underneath. You get this. Ooh. Brilliant. Can you go ta dee dee da da dee dee da da? And play with the piqué, the degrees of piqué as well. That's fine. Brilliant.
Last beat of mother.
Great. That was great. That was fantastic. And experiment with it.
Okay.
Be naughty. Yeah, make the other one wait. Do some.
Yeah.
This wonderful interplay of the story is great. Okay, don't lose focus because you're blowing more, which is great, but focus it into the flute. Sometimes there's just going off a little bit with the tuning, that's fine. Also, keep the phrase moving. Through the trick is with the piqué or the more sort of dotted element of the inégal, not to make it not too many accents. Ya di di da da di di da da di di da da. Just keep those waves coming, moving forward, and try not to slow down at the end in the cadence.
Okay.
And then you've got da di di da 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 di da di da 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 di da dum. Tom, ti di di dum di da. So you've got another statement. He starts the second half like that, doesn't he? Can we go from the second half?
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's lovely. Fantastic. That's great. So you've got this darker moment there, don't you?
Yes.
Fantastic. That's great. And then something new happens, which is with the little scale. So take time there. And acknowledge the color change. You can do some flattement. Absolutely. And take time there as well. The cadence. And so on. And so on. So that's different. And also there's two things. If you look at the beginning of the page, because I know you're reading from facsimile, aren't you, which is brilliant. So on page 5, so at the beginning, you've got the end of the previous line, right? So dee da da dee dee ta dum, and then the top part starts the next phrase. So what's different is that at the end of that phrase, you both start together. And can you see that is like the first time that's happened so far in the piece? Yeah. That's significant, just because it's different. There's always been some interplay or somebody egging somebody on, and suddenly you finish it from a sort of darker place, not sad, but just a little bit less. It's just so lovely, and it's cascading down. And the same thing, you can just take a breath on the second line after the cadence. It's not, I don't want you to stop in the cadence, I don't want you particularly to slow down at all, but it's just how you go from the end of a phrase to the beginning of the other. Do you see what I mean? That's where all the magic is. You got and so on. So it just needs to breathe and to move by its own. You're doing a fabulous job. Really fabulous. What joy. I am so lucky I get to hear this.
I feel quite transported, actually. All this beautiful music. I'm sat staring in London out of the window, the most horrendous weather, and suddenly I'm in a place. I haven't had to worry about travelling, passports, vaccinations, Brexit, any of that malarkey. You've time travelled me, which is wonderful.
Oh, isn't that, we just all need a bit of this right now,
Yes.
don't we?
Escapism.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we are in 18th century Paris. This is homemaking music. Hotteterre is just really, really important music. He would teach it to so many. Publishing this, there was huge market, huge appetite for these pieces. This is why he puts, Marshal Villard, because everyone who would know. They would know what a musette was. They would know how to dance a minuet. It was assumed you'd know. And of course, for those of you who don't know, musette is beautiful French bagpipe, which was very popular. And so at the time, and there's not that many at the moment playing, but there's one wonderful play in the UK. And she's just such a lovely, lovely play. And we're so lucky to have her. But go and listen to Musette. Go and listen.
You're thinking of Amanda, aren't you?
I am. Do you know when for a moment I froze? I can remember. Yeah, Amanda Babington, she is.
Also plays violin, Baroque violin, and is a Handel scholar too. So all great things mixed in together.
Strong women, we like them. Doing great things.
We've got time to hear the Musette, haven't we?
Yes, I would love that. Oh, and by the way, this is just a little aside, but talking about strong women, it was International Women's Day a couple of days ago, and that's an important thing. The French salon was akin in the 18th century, in the beginning of the 18th century, was akin to sort of the Italian accademias, where the birth of the opera, we've got Jacopo Peri, you've got Caccini, you've got all of these people doing. This is a different country, different era. But what we did find in the salon music was women philosophers and thinkers to the mix. And I think that's so fantastic. And I don't think many people know this. But they were there, doing their thing, which is fantastic. So the musette. So what I want you to imagine is the drone. Because the musette has a drone, and this has got lots and lots of elements of musette-like. He writes it with a very particular intention. I can hear musette. It's written in this particular way for a reason too. This is really a musette en rondeau, because you've got A, B, A, C, A. Okay, in the structure of it, it comes back to A all the time. And so before, I know I'm giving you lots of information before you start, but the intention is with each different section, the B and the C, that you find a different part of the story before you go back to the musette. And this then follows into the minuet, which is also a minuet in the shape of a musette, because the slurs carry on, don't they? And in fact, you go back. Go back to the musette afterwards. So if you play the both, that'd be fantastic. My goodness, thank you. That's so gorgeous. I'm transported immediately. My head is full of all this gorgeous sort of French world. It is just such a treat to hear you both play. My God, thank you. I get very excited about this. That's fantastic. Now, just a very technical thing before we go into anything else. You know the ornament you've got on the first line, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the A. So you've got, yeah, this is called a double cadence appuyée. So although on the face of it, it looks just like an appoggiatura with a trill, but actually, technically, it's a particular effect.
Okay.
Where the first note is held longer and the trill is much shorter. T. And so what that creates is lightness, you see. So double cadence appuyé, and this is Hotteterre's own ornament that he specifies. Rather. So what that does, it lightens the end of that particular thing, but it also makes it continue. Creates space for the next. Okay, do you want to have a little go?
Yes.
Thank you. Fabulous. That's it. It changes it, you see. Isn't that amazing? It's a. Do you know what they say? God is in a detail.
Yes.
You know, it is a very particular thing. And the other thing, I really wanted to hear the drone. Because it's underneath it all. Because you've got don't you? I would go and be really naughty then, but why not? You know, there's nothing saying you don't. Now, this is the B section is very Musette-like. If you go and listen to recordings, perhaps of Amanda, there's we lost a great Musette player, Ménard, who was just such a nice man. Him and I corresponded for a bit when I was doing, I was looking into Musettes and other French woodwind that won flutes, and he was such a kind and general soul, and we sadly lost him. He was very young, but his recordings are legendary, and I know there are some on YouTube. And it's really worth hearing the sound. It's a little instrument. I know that a lot of lutes were destroyed as for the backs as the musette became very, very popular on the making of them. Yes, Tati.
What was the name? I've got two questions before I forget. What was the ornament? Could you say the name again slowly?
Yes, it's double cadence appuyée.
Fantastic, thank you. And also, text me when you have a moment. Not that you really do have a moment. And the YouTube name, and I can put that up as well. I
need to make sure I've got the right name because I'm terrible with it. So in let's see if I can find it here. It's like I can. There we go. Double cadence appuyée. There we go. There.
Just hold it a little higher.
It's a teeny one. See?
Double cadence appuyée. Right.
That's the one. That's the one, and it's there. And every so now and again, you just need, because it does something to the music, you see.
Jean-Christophe Maillard. Yeah, we've got
that's it. Jean-Christophe Maillard. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. He was
just
Yes, thank you. Okay, so when you hear Musette play, you will hear why this is written the way it is. Because the chant has changed, and they have to articulate. They have to do little ornaments to be able to articulate, and this is why you've got ti da, because that alludes to the continuous sound that they have to do. That is an articulation in Musette, and this is why it's written the way it is. I would really go for it with the flatman. When you hear the Musette played, well, you will know why I'm asking you to do this. This is Musette music. I could hear two Musettes playing this. Yeah. And just at the end with this, I know we're running out of time. And so all I wanted to say is just experiment with it and with changes in sonority and colour. You're doing wonderful, wonderful things with it. And it's just all is creating a balance between the elegance and, you know, how to articulate, how to make change, how to make contrast within its with its elegance. And I just have to commend you both for giving us such a treat. Come again if we do this. It'd be nice.
Too. It's been absolutely stunning, and it really has been a form of time travel. I mean, it's just all of you, both Anna and Julia and Emily together. It really, you're taking us to a different place, which is what I love about this period of music. We are as close to historical detectives and time travelers as we can hope to be, and you're our portal. You're helping us do this. So thank you so much. Do look at our website, everyone who's watching this session, because we'll keep updating as and when we're able to add new classes and what the subject, the topic will be. And also there's such a lot of information here. We'll put this film up on our YouTube channel so you can go back at leisure and get hold of some of this information. But it just remains now for me to thank you, Julia and Emily, for your performance, and presumably getting up quite early in America to do this.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it so much.
It was a great pleasure to meet you. I hope we see you again. And for now, sorry we're running a little bit late, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce Georgia. The class will probably overrun a little bit, but I hope that everyone, or especially all the performers, can stay till the end, and we can thank you again. But Georgia, do you just want to very briefly just say a couple of words about yourself, just to introduce us?
I'm obviously a mature player. I've been playing for decades. I've known Lisette for many years, and probably she introduced me to French Baroque about maybe 10 years ago, Lisette, something like that.
I've been poor thing.
And it started on a wonderful journey. I recently started to play this voice flute, which is a bit of a labour of love, and I'm just kind of getting to grips with it. But I think it's the most wonderful sound, but it's quite a challenge to play. But yeah, really, really enjoying it.
Thank you, Georgia. Thank you.
Georgia, you're going to play Blavet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is wonderful because it really, goes towards the sort of very much the third period, that Italian influence. So this is a sonata, and by now you've got things like Locatelli, people like Locatelli being printed, and not only in Holland and other places, but France, avec privilège du roi, very much influenced. Now you've got a group of players. 1740 is in fact when Blavet becomes first flute of Académie Royale de Musique, French opera house. He is a very curious player. As some of you know, he was left-handed, self-taught, and he never lost the habit of playing left-handed. Indeed.
Wow.
Yes, he most certainly, perhaps would have played a Naust flute. He certainly worked at there was streets, even today you go to Paris and you've got streets for, wood turners, and still there's some wonderful music shops in some parts of Paris, and this is how it was. You've got the Lot family, you've got the Naust, you've got all of these makers, some intermarrying, and something that's quite curious that I didn't get to say is that it wasn't unusual for the marriage of young aspiring makers to the daughters of older makers, by the way, so that they marry houses of instrument makers, and that's certainly true of the flute. If you are so inclined, there is a wonderful book by Tula Giannini that I have had the great pleasure of meeting various times, including in Paris, and having great old chats about flute makers while sipping wine, as you do in Paris. But her book is called Great Flute Makers of France.
Tula Giannini.
Her research into, actually Horn, she's done some wonderful research. She's really dedicated her life. She's, I think, in New York. She's a great lady, and She is great fun as well, and she knows her stuff. So that's really, really lovely. So anyway, Blavet really symbolizes and comes into the sort of bright and things of the Paris musical scene. He was sort of the most famous, a bit of a rock star at the time. He played in many private orchestras, including Rameau's orchestra in private by his patron. And he was definitely would have really listened to all this wonderful influence. There's a lot of instrument design that's changing. There's a much more symphonic sound to the orchestras coming through, and at the same time you still have the old regime, and you've got the you've got this old in you going, but this is definitely Italian influenced. And it's so very, very exciting. George is playing this in a voice flute, and why not? You can play this. Music is a wonderful thing. I think as recorder players, really in France, by the time Hotteterre publishes his treatise, recorder really was very much on the decline. However, what I think is wonderful, but some people kept it going in the 21st century, I really truly believe is the best time historically to be a recorder player, because we've got at our disposal all this gorgeous music and instruments. There were tenor recorders, there were different sizes of recorders that were used in opera a lot. And again, I will really I talk a lot about Lisocki, but David Lisocki, he is really a giant of woodwind research, and I cannot recommend enough his series on the French Baroque. And you've got, this is research that I really wished I had access to when I started my research, because he really goes and gives you so much detail about the players, about the instruments and how they were used. So I really recommend, I cannot recommend this book enough. So 1740, very much Italian style. Blavet is really at the top of his game. Yes, and this is one of his sonatas, slow movement from the third sonata. Georgia, that was beautiful. And really, truly, truly beautiful. I mean, really. Thank you. I know you've been I know you've been having trouble with that voice flute, but honestly, this is what I love about using voice flutes for this repertoire is the depth and richness of sound. It's just gorgeous. And you've got, I mean, clearly this is really, really Italian. And you've got largo, poco, andante. So it's slow, but a little bit. Poco andante, so not too fast, not too andante. But what you do have, and for those you can see the bass line, you've got like a heartbeat, don't you? So much of the time, supporting what I really think. I always say everything is vocal. Because I do believe
Best way to practice is to sing it, isn't it? For any instrument.
Yeah, exactly. And what I love about your playing, George, is I really can hear the elasticity. The reason why I say so much is vocal is because the human voice has got this wonderful natural ability to do all that we aspire to as musicians, isn't it? Between articulation, between dynamics, and you've got all the sort of full stops, question marks, all of those things are within something that we do since we start talking. And before we start talking, what do? We sing. That's what babies do. They babble, they sing, they find their own song, and they find their own speech. And I do have very small children, so I'm really discovering that. Obviously they're both talking now, but it's wonderful to hear. And so that's what's one of the very many gorgeous things about your playing, is that you've got now the elasticity and that ability, also the ability to lose bar lines and it to be about the wider phrase, really. And I think this is, again, I will say something I say a lot perhaps with slow movements, but there is something about a lament-like quality to this. And I really think that, you've got this wonderful movements, moments all the way through. The thing that we need to work on is making sure we are clear when it's not to get stuck in phrases. Sometimes we need to move a little bit. And also when to give it space. You are really good now at giving space and having that elasticity. Yes, Tati.
Sorry, I keep putting my hand up like I'm in class.
No, it's brilliant.
I don't like texting too much and distracting.
Okay.
But no, I've a query from one of our audience. Could you clarify exactly what is a voice flute as opposed to recorder?
Oh, what a great question. So I really should say this thing. Well, a voice flute is a recorder. It's a tenor recorder in D. That's it. And so we have a lot of evidence of it being here in England, actually, probably brought with the Bresson family. And I remember when I was a student at the Royal Academy of Music, about 3 lifetimes ago, when I was little, knowing that the Bresson workshop wasn't far off in Malvern High Street. It was somewhere around there. So I used to always get a little, like a little kick out of it. So it's, in essence, a tenor recorder in D. That's what it is. And it's called voice flute because of it's akin to the voice, the human voice.
And we've got Ben asking, is it the same pitch as a Baroque flute?
Indeed.
Is that the same pitch as a Baroque flute?
Some people say, well, it was created to play the same repertoire as a Baroque flute, which is not entirely true, because it was alongside it, very much so. But anyway, what it does is has this gorgeous, luscious sound that I think is really, which is why we like it, isn't it, Georgia?
I love it. It's just a bit temperamental. Like you have to, you can't just, I don't know, you have to treat it in a different way, don't you? You can't rely on it in the same way that you can, I don't know, like factory made recorders or it's just.
No, they're very, very specific. And it's just, you also, I think with each size of recorder, you have to blow and you have to make friends of it with it. And it's really knowing technically what to do with the low. That a lot with this instrument, if you fight it, it bites back. You have to know how to go around it, how to create that wonderful lusciousness of sound without blowing too hard. Because very often if you blow, that's it, it goes. This instrument is not designed to play brilliantly in the top register, really. And there are, issues with it, of course, but you also get this wonderful sound world from it, don't you? And it's just making friends. And sometimes, some days, it's not so friendly.
Like yesterday.
Yesterday sounding, but you had a bit of oil and a bit of rest. It's just, I think there's no recorder player who won't recognise this, you know.
It really is. It's literally like every pitch is different and it's got a different kind of colour and different kind of problems and good points, but it's very different. It's very uneven from note
it
to
can
note.
be
So
absolutely
very different. Yeah,
that's it. From note that perhaps gurgles, the note that's too sharp. So you've got to find really your way with it. But I think it's exquisite in pieces just like this. So I'm really grateful that you're playing it. It's a treat for me. Okay, so you've got this wonderful iambic rhythm. Sighing. Also watch out for the articulation on the third bar. That's what's written, yes.
that, yeah.
Yeah, you see, God is in the details, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there as well. Which you did so well. That sort of exclamation mark, isn't it? And so on and so forth. It's just so expressive. It's just in a different way. It's just in a different way. And so there, for instance, I would, yes, you've got your wonderful exclamation mark. And I know, I'm aware I played a couple of wrong notes, but so you've got pedal point on the bass, don't you? So don't sit on it too much, because you've got. And then you've got the most stunning note is that just really, but you're doing it really leaning into that note, and the bass line starts moving towards a dissonance, doesn't it, on the bass? So that's really delicious, because you've got this cadence. Really expressive and very rhetorically written. This is like a speech, isn't it? So how could you? And that is, of course, for semiquavers. And so on and so forth. And I would really enjoy the sound under the slur. Really enjoy it. It's such a gorgeous thing to be able to do, and we know that. see what I mean? You can do more. It's really true. This ebb and flow and taking time and all of this free within four alls. And as you know, I think that is the French, that's the one bar that gives it away. If you look carefully, there's one bar who cannot be Frencher than that, and that's that bar. And I think that little note on its own is akin to an accent, which is a sigh. I think it is. Do you want to go from the beginning? So after all that speech, Georgia has been putting up with me and my enthusiasm for French Baroque. She's been my...
I was going again, sorry.
That's all right. I'm very grateful to Georgia for letting me do all of these things, experiment all these things. Brilliant. That's really gorgeous. I love what you do with the sound, how you hold it. Now, I wonder on that, we will call it F sharp, which is the D sharp on the second bar. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then, yeah.
With the first set of the dotted semiquavers, how active would that be?
Well, I think it will change depending where you are. You can start more languidly. Tum tum tum. Do you see what I mean? Be a singer. Ooh, this is quite something. What has he done or she done? What has happened? And it's quite a climb, isn't it? It's wonderful. Da ti da ti da 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 da. Yeah. Yeah, that is so much better. Brilliant. Do you see what I mean? I would do a little bit more at the sides, but always within the phrase, within all the detail, within the bigger arch. Now I'm just trying to see. I think I've done. Oh, there we go. I can see the questions. I can't see Tati anymore.
Ah, that's all right. You can see the question. There's one I've got stored up for the end. Okay.
Oh, brilliant! Because I couldn't see you or the.
Oh, don't worry. No, I've got the question all texted through. We'll come to it at the end. I've explained we're probably going to overrun by about 10 minutes, and that people can catch up, of course, on YouTube if they have to leave. But
yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Yes, Georgia, please go for it. Okay. I would go second, but from the E sharp.
Where are we? So second.
Yeah. It, and then is how you end it, because you've got a higher point. Or see what I mean? You can just start really gentle because it's quite changed, you know. And then you've got repeated notes in the bass, isn't it? A single. It's really like a heartbeat. It's gorgeous, really, really gorgeous. Why don't you go from the first bar of the second line, and to make that, I'm going to see if I can see Tati. Oh, there she is. I couldn't see you, Tati, sorry.
You don't need to see me, it's fine.
Oh, the makers are both Tim Cranmore. They're both Tim Cranmore voice flutes, by the way. Thank you, Tim. Okay, that's it. I would move a little bit. If you take a bit more time, I would move a bit more through then. And also when you get to that wonderful D sharp on the second bar of the third line, it's special. It's so expressive. So if you go from can you just move through a little bit? Jordan, that was beautiful, really gorgeous. I would perhaps on the, this is just really nitpicking, 1, 2, 3, fourth line after your exclamation mark. Don't make them, try not to make them all the same in importance, because actually what you want that's where you want to get. So that is a climb, isn't it? Also, you've just taken time. So what you need to do is how you finish the notes of this little motif. Ta tira, pam para, ta 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 tira, tam ta da ta di da 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 tam. How about that? Dissonance on the first beat of the bar. Ta. It's such a gorgeous blue note, isn't it? And then a cadence is the most boring part, isn't it? If perfect cadence, boring. I'm sure they're very lovely, but that, you know, you've just had all the juice before. What is important? And really go into it. So I've got, yeah. So if you want to go from that exclamation mark.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. That's all right. That's brilliant. And now I just want to. We've got like 3 minutes left. I can't believe how quickly this goes. But isn't that lovely though? It's because we have such a wonderful time. It's how you finish.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's up and up and up.
Yeah.
And
I heard that when you played it, definitely.
Yeah. And that's really what it is. Dum tira, Tam-tam, it's like little sighs, little yearning all the way to the top. And by the time it cadences,
Yeah.
everything is gone now, all the excitement. And then you get this wonderful note that's tied. Then you've got a bit.
That's good. What's that interval, Lisette? That's a cool interval.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that, we like that, on to the first beat.
F to G sharp. No.
Yeah. Yum. It's full of these things. I love flatman. I have such a...
Lisette, Francesco is asking, is flatman on D second octave on traverso possible? Sorry to butt in there, but it's a flatman question.
Oh, that is good. D flatman is tricky, isn't it? It is a bit tricky, because I tell you why. That's a very good question. On the second octave, well, the theory is you go to the next note, isn't it? Because the one that influences more, and then the more you move away from the main note, the less influence. So with the second D, this one, I believe that's what Francesco means, is very difficult, because this one, see how little that influences. Whether you manipulate here, I don't know, but that's a tricky one, that particular one. But on the voice flute, it's beautiful. But on this one, I don't know. The only way is to go up. But it doesn't really work on that one. So you may be able to manipulate. I've never quite found, maybe somebody can tell me.
Having said that particular note, that's difficult to, because that does crack. You can't push that one. You feel like you want to do more with that, but it doesn't, it cracks.
You need to really go around it.
Yeah.
With everything on the recorder, don't, because the recorder's got a wonderful immediacy, but what you don't want is for it sometimes. You can use immediacy, but in something like that, you've got to go around. It's like a hug. And really round underneath, really open. Yeah. And that's it. Jordan, this is really good. We're going to have to stop now, but really how are you playing is just exquisite. Thank you. That was beautiful. And keep up the good work. I can't wait to see what you do. I think it's such a wonderful thing. And I think in many ways, as a mature student going to music college is such an incredible bonus. You've got life experience, and you've got all this ability already built in you. I mean, they should be so lucky.
I'm not giving up the day job, by the way, everybody.
I know. But you are so knowledgeable. You've got these gorgeous instruments and such a beautiful place. So thank you for playing.
Thank you so much, Georgia. Now I've got a question. Now's the time. I know we've overrun. I'll thank everybody. I'll come to that in a little bit. But just if you've got any question you want Lisette to try and answer, ping it across in the chat. And meanwhile, Lisette, there is a question. Did you get it through? Do you want to address it about articulation in fast work?
Yes, with the fast passages, the diddle. Well, diddle is what we call, is what Courante says is in English articulation. Is not French. I don't know it as a French articulation. It's, if you think of the language, what lies on the language more is the front, isn't it? Which is what Hotteterre really what he refers to. But I personally, I think I know what suits me. Again, I've said this before, because of where I come from is on the front. I find anything diddle, dugger and tucker hard. And I really have had to work at it. And I'm not sure I can do it very well. But what I do much better, that I can do. And that is very much, I think, much more French. Can you hear how light it is as well? Because if you start, it's got a difference, and that was dugger. It's not, I think, suitable.
And it was a question about incorporating tires into the articulation as well.
Yes, absolutely, tiri, absolutely.
Tiri. Okay, perfect.
Absolutely.
I don't think that now's your chance to ask a question. If anyone's got one, you've got the most amazing fount of knowledge here.
Oh, wow.
Really, I find these afternoons so stimulating. Apart from having to master technology, of course.
You've done amazingly, Tati. I mean, really.
No, I'm just glad I've not thrown everyone out of Zoom, which did once happen a while back. Luckily, it was only a meeting with 3 people, because we've got the most amazing resource here in Lisette, who's, I mean, as you can tell, to cram this much information into a relatively short session is incredible. There's such a lot more to discover and to tell, and I've got lots of lists of books and treatises. I think maybe the easiest thing is, if you do want to know more, do email. You get a follow-up email anyway, and I'll put some links to that. Sign up to our YouTube channel to watch it and resources. It helps us tremendously if you can follow us in all the usual social media, because it just helps visibility at a time when we really can't be together. If you've enjoyed the session, we will be planning some more at some stage. We're not sure when yet. We've been able to provide these free of charge, but if you feel like chipping in I think martini's your drink of choice, isn't it, Lisette?
Oh, I'm going to have a lovely martini.
That you can donate via our website. It's under Brook Street Band. It's on the homepage anyway. But actually, there are a couple of questions. Let me just check. I haven't missed them. Blavet. I will, Jane. Lisette, could you explain the exact details of the Blavet Sonata?
Sorry, what do you mean? In what way?
What was the piece called? It didn't come up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, of course. Okay, this is the book. Okay, so this it's his 3rd book, 1740, and this is the 3rd sonata, Sonata Terza.
Brilliant, thank you.
Second movement, yeah.
Actually, it just remains for me to thank our wonderful players who've done such wonders over the internet. Anna, thank you so much for your beautiful, absolutely beautiful piece, your Philidor. Julia and Emily for the Hotteterre, and stunning music. I didn't know that piece, and I didn't know either of the pieces. I shall be delving deeper into them. And Georgia for the Blavet, which I do know, but again, absolutely wonderful, and lovely to hear the voice flute. It really does have this kind of rich, mellow quality to it. It's been just a lovely afternoon, way of spending the afternoon to hear you play and to hear Lisette's wonderful teaching. So the most important thank you, of course, now is to Lisette. Thank you for sharing your passion and knowledge and enthusiasm and your amazing linguistic skills, happily jumping between all sorts of languages.
Well, I'm just very grateful that you give me the opportunity to talk about it.
I've got comments coming in saying from our attendees, thank you to Lisette.
Thank you, Ben.
To go practice now. Everyone's been inspired and they're going to go and do some practice.
So go and listen to the operas, listen to, oh my God, the cantatas. Go and learn dance, Baroque dance. Everyone go and find a lovely teacher. Get moving, get that body moving, sing, do, oh my goodness. Thank you everyone for listening.
Yes, thank you. Do keep an eye on our website, because when we have more, we'll put it up. Plans for summer schools, all sorts of things, when we're allowed to be unlocked and be together again. So for now, just thank you so much for joining us and for providing such wonderful music for us all to listen to. Bye for now.